Welcome to another Vendavo webcast. Today we're going to look at a broad set of pricing methodologies across the areas of strategy, tactics, and organizational considerations that are used across a wide variety of industries, and combine that with observations from the latest survey conducted by Copperberg and Vendavo for the aftermarket industry. This is the first webcast in a series of three, and in this webcast we'll focus on the area of pricing strategies. Before we turn to that, some brief introductions. My name is Mitch Lee. I'm the Profit Evangelist for Vendavo. You've probably seen me in your email inbox as the Profit Prophet, and occasionally I'll be referred to as the Minister of Margin, the Rabbi of Revenue, the Imam of Income, or even the Bishop of the Bottom Line. Right now, I'm pleased to serve as your humble host. I'm joined today by Ramin Imani. He's a pricing and business consultant with particular focus on strategic and operational digital pricing and, of course, revenue management. He has a tremendous amount of experience working in both B2B and B2C environments, such as aftermarket, product manufacturing, and the distribution business, and of course, many more beyond that. Hello, Ramin. Glad you could join us. A couple of words of introduction, please.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for having me here. This is an area of interest for me to carry out a research study review and combine it with my own experience in Vendavo. I would like to give full credit to the research study done by Stefan Liajou and Hinder Haber and their team. So let's get it started.
That's right. Stefan and Andreas are very well-known thought leaders in the area of pricing. I'm sure most folks listening on this webcast are familiar with their contributions. And a bit of housekeeping. We'll answer questions at the end of each of these three segments at the end of the discussion, but you can submit your questions at any point along the way by using the Ready Talk chat function. And be assured, if we can't get to your question during the webcast, we'll reach out to you with an answer afterwards. So Ramin, let's take a look at the areas that we'll cover today and put that in context with the three webcasts.
Sure. As you have said, over the course of this webcast and the other two webcasts, we're going to cover an innovative pricing methodology with three avenues in pricing strategy, pricing tactiques, and the proper organizational setup required to allow companies of any size to embark on innovative pricing transformation. Today, in this first webcast, we're going to focus on pricing strategy and discuss and look at various examples studied by academic works and practiced by several successful international companies across the globe. We'll cover the pricing tactiques and organizational consideration in later webcasts. Within each of these areas, we'll discuss a set of potential approaches that might fit to your business. Bear in mind that this methodology is only a very high-level roadmap that can potentially guide you to set the right direction for your pricing innovation journey.
This is great. I'm very much looking forward to this, Ramin. Why don't you set up the situation for us?
Yeah, sure. Generally, the industrial sector is considered slow moving and conservative. It has gone through major changes throughout history, but as the pace of change accelerates due to a culmination of factors like a fourth industrial revolution, connectivity, and globalization, manufacturers need to adapt accordingly all the aspects of their business, including the pricing methodology, in order to be able to stay in the game. In this webcast, I'm going to share with you a pricing methodology inspired by the earlier academic research and complemented by our broad experience in commercial excellence on how to stay innovative and relevant on the pricing side of your business.
That's right, Ramin. We've conducted a survey in collaboration with the folks at Copperberg across the aftermarket segment, and that engaged about 215 service practitioners, pricing practitioners across various verticals within the manufacturing industry. And the top four verticals that we saw there were machinery and industrial equipment, followed by automotive, then marine, and then healthcare and life sciences.
When we look into the most of businesses today, we notice that there is a fundamental profit disconnect. Companies work hard to bring a product to the market by investing significant effort and money in R&D, distribution, marketing strategy, but When it comes to price setting and price getting strategy, how essentially businesses get compensated for their hard work and financial risk, most companies literally drop the ball. According to research by Dr. Hinterhuber and his team, less than 5% of companies have applied innovation into their pricing approach. Few companies treat innovation and pricing as seriously as product innovation or business model innovation. Research studies suggest that innovation in pricing may be a company's most powerful and in many cases least explored sources of competitive advantage. We have seen that most managers are uncomfortable setting prices and sometimes they have no clue how to get that price. They have often a few pricing golden rules and a little practical guidance for improvement. Usually, these folks see the pricing as a win-loss proposition between themselves and their customers, and therefore it is understandable why firms have continued with the status quo.
Ramin, that situation of just continuing, maintaining the status quo is an interesting point. I want to contrast that position with an industry that's particularly forward looking, the aftermarket vertical, and efforts there to break that status quo to essentially develop new business models. So here's one of the first findings from the Copperberg Vendavo survey of business people in the aftermarket vertical, and it's about investments being made to support the move to servitization. So on the far left, what we're looking at is diagnostics, that is putting the type of technology on the machines and the instruments that are going out, to platforms for e-commerce or alignment for virtual reality or augmentation. Of course, the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then the service automation itself. And then there's this big gap in terms of tension investment being made in terms of how are you going to manage the pricing applications, the pricing tools. So even in these conditions where businesses are looking for new profitability models, pricing really seems to be almost an afterthought. So what I would suggest is that presents a huge opportunity. You mentioned the innovation aspects. Don't forget to be looking at how you support innovation on your pricing as you develop and support innovation in your products. Because as we all know, everybody on the call right now is sure well aware that when you're talking about improvements of pricing, it's a huge improvements of profitability. We always talk about the ratio of something like a 1% improvement in price is very often going to drop down to 7% improvement in profitability, depending, of course, on what market you're in or what industry you're in. But those are good rules of thumb in terms of setting the size of the prize.
That's right, Mitch. When a business aims to be innovative in their business model, they need to be innovative in their pricing. They need to bring new to the industry approaches and addresses the three front of pricing approach simultaneously, including pricing strategy, pricing tactics, and the organization that is required to support the pricing function. You have to understand this allows the company to create a win-win proposition between themselves and their customers to increase customer satisfaction and sustainable profit growth. At Vendavo, we have been working with numerous B2B businesses in various verticals around the globe, and we are thrilled to share with you guys this methodology as well as some of our experience implementing these approaches. Here are some of the examples of well-known companies who understood the power of innovation in pricing earlier than their competitor and embraced the approach that we call here innovative pricing. Rolls-Royce. Historically, the company sold aircraft engines to airlines at or below cost in an attempt to recover profit through complicated and non-transparent maintenance contracts. This created a situation in which customer satisfaction was low because service contracts were expensive and capital outlays were high. And even with that, Rolls-Royce was struggling to bridge the gap between its own capital outlays and cash inflow. To combat this situation, Rolls-Royce adopted a different approach in their pricing strategy and, of course, their business model. It enabled them to overcome both problems. Instead of selling jet engines, Rolls-Royce started to sell uptime, or the so-called power by the hour concept. This is essentially the usage right to jet engines, including maintenance and spare parts. Another example is the Salesforce, the CRM software as a service giant. In 1991, Salesforce.com, instead of selling software, it started to sell licenses usage right to customers who appreciate the advantage of tying payments to usage intensity. In contrast with traditional software pricing, in which customers pay a fixed fee regardless of benefit experience. Another example can be Zipcar, car sharing, car renting company. Instead of renting their cars on a daily basis, they started to use a more flexible basis by the minute concept.
Thanks, Ramin. Those examples are very innovative and they really make us think about the idea of servitization. And here's some more data that we've pulled from the Copperberg Vendavo aftermarket survey that shows that there's real money on the table when you think about this. Now, this data is for the current state with current pricing practices in the aftermarket industry. And the question asked was, how much of the total does services contribute? So on the left, we're looking at revenue. The bar at the very top of that chart shows that about two-thirds said that services contributed less than 30% of total company revenue. Now contrast that with what we see on the right, where we're looking at profits. And here, if you add up the bars for 30 to 49, 50 to 69, and 70% or more, roughly two-thirds of respondents said services contribute 30% or more of the company's total profitability. So the lesson for everyone from the aftermarket business model is that converting your offer, how you go to market, from the first sale of the product only to an offer that literally maintains the relationship with your customer is a very profitable move. And you can see the logic of thinking about that business model as a service, and very likely that turning into a long-term play for partnerships with your customers. That is, think less about just selling the jet engine and more about how the customer uses your offer to create value over the long haul.
Thanks, Mitch. That's a great takeaway from the aftermarket studies. The methodology that I'm going to walk you through contain three fronts: pricing strategy, pricing tactique, and the organizational setup required to embark on an innovative pricing transformation. Within each front, I present you a set of potential approach that might fit your business. Bear in mind that this methodology is only a very high-level roadmap that can potentially guide you to set the right direction for your pricing innovation journey. Before we jump into the various pricing strategies, please let me to define the strategy in general. What I meant by a strategy is essentially a group of initiatives designed to meet an overall goal, like market expansion. So the first well-known pricing strategy is this so-called good, better, best approach. And instead of a one-size-fits-all pricing policy, multiple prices and value configuration are adapted, reflecting differences in value creation for different market segments. Good, better, best market segmentation offers individuals a relatively large number of products at different price points in order to address an array of customers with variation in their willingness to pay. A good example for this can be the Allstate, one of the most profitable auto insurance companies in North America. Allstate was able to successfully compete against no-frills internet competitors through a policy of price and value segmentation. Depending on the client's brand and price sensitivity and need for customer support, Allstate essentially started to divide individual into four distinct quadrants: high-low brand sensitivity and high-low self-service, and competes in this different market segment through four distinct brands, offering a substantially different customer experience at different price points. Although good, better, best market segmentation is innovation for many companies, this approach has an important limitation. Customers typically struggle to understand to which degree these limited different products meet their specific needs. In other words, customers have very specific and complex needs, not just the desire to purchase a low price, a mid price, or premium price product. A mitigation for this strategy, in case it does not suit your wide customer needs, can be the golden standard of market segmentation, the need-based market segmentation, which I cover in the next slide. Need-based market segmentation allows companies to simultaneously offer a multitude of products in the premium as well as in the entry-level category with close to zero cannibalization. Since these products are squarely targeted at clearly distinct needs of well-defined customers. A great example for implementation of this pricing strategy in conjunction with the successful marketing initiatives can be seen at the Electrolux, the Swedish multinational home appliance manufacturer. Electrolux, since the global rollout of its needs-based market segmentation approach, has far outpaced its competitors in terms of growth and profitability. And here is the statement from the former CEO, Hans Strasberg. I would love to read this, Mitch, for our listeners here, as it nicely explains the power of this pricing strategy. He says, given the differences in what customer value, we have abandoned the traditional industry segmentation based on price and a good, better, base hierarchy. Now, our segmentation has as many as 20 product positions that relates directly to different lifestyle and purchasing pattern of consumers. The next pricing strategy, in contrary to need-based market segmentation, utilizes the final outcome and the value generated for the customers as the basis for price setting and for price getting. Under pay-for-performance pricing, the seller pays depending on performance outcomes determined conjointly with the customer. To make this strategy crystal clear for the folks here, let's look at a brilliant usage of this strategy in a pharmaceutical case. The UK, Sweden, Australia, and I guess Canada are among the few places where reimbursement of new pharmaceutical product is closely tied to criteria reflecting the new product's incremental value over existing therapies. For new pharmaceuticals, the UK has a threshold range of 20 to 30,000 pounds per quality adjustment life year. In this environment, Velcade by Johnson & Johnson, a product for treating multiple myeloma, is considered not cost effective since treatment costs are approximately 40,000 per quality adjusted life year. In this scenario, if J&J wanted to follow the traditional pricing approaches, they had to either drop the price significantly to reach the threshold, price drop of around 50%, or exit the UK market. Johnson & Johnson, however, utilized the pay-for-performance pricing and proposed an alternative pricing scheme. In this new pricing offering, the pharmaceutical company links reimbursement to effectiveness. And only when patients respond fully to the new drug, they do remain on therapy. In this scenario, the drug is funded by the NHS, the National Health System. When patients show no or minimal response, the treatment ceases and Johnson & Johnson bears the full cost. Industrial services such as software, consulting, logistic, transportation are other areas where this pricing strategy, pay for performance, can be used and has been practiced. However, the challenge associated with the performance-based pricing is that it is costly, largely because monitoring is intensive.
So, Ramin, this example is very close to the power by the hour example that you described earlier, but instead of a relatively simple outcome measure of uptime, for example, or availability of that jet engine, in this case, the outcomes are harder to measure and monitor over time.
That's right, Mitch. Measurement is an important component when considering new business models. The next pricing strategy that can bring innovation into the pricing front of any business is an audacious pricing strategy. The next pricing strategy called pricing to drive market expansion. In contrary to the so far mentioned pricing strategy, this pricing strategy encourages businesses not only to directly compete for market share, but also to attempt for market expansion. A well-known example for this is the pricing of the Ford Model T. Between 1910 and 1925, Ford reduced prices by approximately 80%, therefore expanded sales volume more than 50 times. Here is the quote from Great Henry Ford. regarding this policy and how he thought about this policy, which I would like to read it for the folks here. He says that our policy is to reduce the price, extend the operation, and improve the article. You will notice that the reduction of price comes first. We have never considered any cost as fixed. Therefore, we first reduce the price to a point where we believe more sales will result. Then we go ahead and try to make the price. We do not bother about the cost. The new price forces the costs down. This is very interesting. Another example is Swedish client IKEA. IKEA does not allow cost to dictate the prices. Rather, it determines prices based on what key customer segment are willing to pay. The company then works backward to determine allowable cost. This focus on prices as driver of cost allows IKEA to continuously expand the overall market for home furniture. Next is a pricing strategy that is somehow looks on the surface similar to the Payforperformance pricing strategy, though with subtle differences. This pricing strategy, as it's also been stated by Stefan Liagieux and Hinter Haber, is called new metrics. And before we jump into this, let me ask you one question to clarify this strategy for you. Why people buy quarter-inch drill bits? They don't want quarter-inch bits, they want quarter-inch holes. That's how we can start with thinking about this strategy. In reality, people don't buy products. They buy the expectation of benefits. People spend their money not for goods and services, but to get the value satisfaction they believe are bestowed by what they are buying. So essentially, this strategy requires a mindset to align price setting policy with customer goals and tie the price getting with the value generated. This in turn often leads to a new pricing metrics. And here are some of the examples where companies have aligned the basis of their own pricing policy with clearly defined customer outcomes. This alignment generates high customer satisfaction, thus overcoming customer resistance to a change in pricing approach. Here are the examples as it has been reflected in the research study by Stefan Liagieux. So one example is BASF, a chemical company. The traditional pricing strategy that they used to implement was paint sold on a per kilogram basis to car manufacturer. Now, when they started to think about implementation of this pricing strategy, they set prices based on set per painted car. That was their new metric. And the result of this usage of this strategy was the higher customer satisfaction, joint collaboration with customers to reduce environmental impact and paint consumption. The other example is Michelin, the tire manufacturer company. They used to sell tires largely at a fixed price, but when they start to look into this pricing metric, Michelin started Fleet Solution. They started this Michelin Fleet Solution, which sells mobility. The pricing strategy was based on performance per kilometer and includes maintenance. And the result of this was initial difficulties. That was one of the challenges that they had some pushback from the clients, but the new metric allowed them to expand this strategy across Europe at above average margin. Another company that we have here is Schindler. Essentially, Schindler used to sell elevator at cost plus pricing approach, but when they try to embrace this new pricing strategy, they essentially start to sell usage right. And then the pricing was variable based on distance and number of passengers transported. The result of this pricing strategy was in turn market share growth in competitive market, access to new customer segments. Those were the results for Schindler. Another interesting pricing strategy is the so-called zero as the special price. Essentially, zero price uniquely captures customer attention. So this is one of the drivers and one of the key elements in this pricing approach. But to explain this, let's start with a famous and successful company, at least in Europe, the Ryanair, the airline that operates in Europe. jetliner with average flight revenue of just 40 euro per customer barely breaks even on its flight operation. However, it is one of the most profitable Europe airlines, mainly because of the high margin and profitability in its ancillary revenues. Income such as from third parties, early boarding fees, baggage fees, and onboard sales. The idea behind this pricing strategy is to give away the main product and heavily monetize the ancillary products. In the same fashion, we can see the implementation of this pricing strategy in other businesses like Skype. Skype give away the internet calls, the main service for free, but the fixed line calls are sold at regular prices, or even the Google. The search is free, but the ads are sold. The last pricing strategy is the so-called participative pricing, which covers the following two approaches. Name your own price and pay what you want. In the former strategy, customers ask to submit a bid price for a product, and the customer receives the product only if the bid price is higher than an unknown threshold price or the highest threshold. A successful company that has embraced this strategy is the eBay and Priceline that have implemented this strategy in their online platform. eBay is famous to everyone, but the Priceline is an American company that provide discounted travel-related offerings. The benefit of this approach can be named as a large degree of price discrimination among customers. It is more profitable than fixed price if the seller is monopolist. Name your own price strategy essentially increases profitability by allowing a company to expand its current customer base with price sensitive customers who would otherwise not purchase. Pay what you want. This strategy allows the customer full discretion in price setting. In contrast to a name your own price mechanism, sellers have to accept any price, including zero. Example of pay what you want pricing strategy can be found in information services like Wikipedia. It's for free and people can donate whatever they want. Or we can see it in museum, voluntary contribution. In the music industry, we have a famous band called Radiohead, a British band, I guess. And also we can see this strategy sometimes in the hotel and restaurant industry. In three experimental study involving restaurants and cinemas, pay what you want. Strategy pricing led to lower average prices than previously posted fixed prices, but higher revenue due to new demand.
That's a very challenging and audacious approach as well. But obviously, what they're going for here is yes, total revenue, and that's because they've introduced new points of demand that might not have been there before. Excellent. Thanks for that, Ramin. So it's time now to turn to some questions that we've been getting that have been coming in via the chat function. You can continue to submit your questions, and remember, if we can't get to it during this webcast, we'll reach out to you afterwards with an answer. So here's the first one, Ramin. I'll paraphrase a little bit. I like the idea of good, better, best in terms of a product offering, but I really don't have products that support that kind of close but not exact relationship. I think what they mean is their products don't have a lot of variations within the base. They go on to say, are there other options for good, better, best when in a situation like this?
Yeah, so I mean, when you try to look at this strategy, you can think about combining your limited product offering with different set of services that you provide. For instance, if you look at the delivery business, you can have a base product that you offer, but also you can provide different services, maybe 24/7 services, weekend delivery services, same day delivery services, and then that can create a new form of end product or service for the customers that receive that value.
Yeah, right. I've seen situations where you've got this happens very often in the commodity industry, for example. You've got a very fungible thing that you're selling, but base is, yep, you can call and I will deliver on an 8 to 5 basis, 8 in the morning to 5 p.m. the basis. That's my base product, my bronze offering. My silver offering might be I'll offer delivery of that same product, that same commodity product, but I'll offer it with night delivery as well as working hours delivery. And then perhaps my gold offering is, again, that very same base product with the 24/7 delivery. Whenever you want it delivered, I will have it delivered that way. And even though it is very much indistinguishable in terms of the product characteristics against my competitors, I'm adding a service component to that, and that combination of product and service is in fact a new and differentiated offering that then you can think about having that conversation then with your customer in terms of what do you really want? How can I differentiate myself in terms of what I'm offering to the customer? Okay, here's another question that has come in, Ramin. Again, I'll paraphrase. You mentioned the new metrics approach. That sounds like a great idea, but how do you know what metric to use? Right? And I think what they're talking about with the customer here, right?
Mhm. So, I mean, this is a very delicate topic that anyone who is dealing with the customers, run the business, should understand what actually make a difference for the customers of that service or product, and conjointly with a sort of agreement with the client, you need to make sure that the approach that you set the price and the strategy that you set the price can result into the bottom line value creation for the client, and you get paid as you add value.
Right, Ramin, that's important. It's also critical to understand your internal metrics. That is, what are you doing to support that joint agreed metric that you've got with the customer in terms of your basis for selling? What are the performance characteristics of the components of your offering that contribute to or impact that value metric that is agreed with the customer? It's rarely just one thing or the measurement of one thing or different attributes of one thing that make that impact. You probably have example we had before with good, better, best. It might be characteristics around yes, the commodity product in terms of specs on that. It also might be another set of characteristics around the delivery time. How well are you hitting the on time promises there? And so understanding your costs around those different bits that tie that together is incumbent on you in terms of managing your costs, managing your margin relative to that single measure that you're giving to the customer there. Ramin, thanks very much for joining us here today. This has been a great discussion.
My pleasure to be here, Mitch.
And thanks to everyone for joining us here today. Remember, this is part one of a three-part series. Be sure and watch for announcements for our next webcast as we continue this series. Until then, this is Mitch Lee, your Profit Prophet, wishing you a profitable day.